The Force is an integral part of the Star Wars franchise, and it is essentially an energy field created by all living things. Ever since Obi-Wan first introduced us to the concept of Force in 1977, we have learned that the Force binds the galaxy together and helps the Jedi and the Sith with their powers. From the ability to control minds, revive individuals, create life, and even levitate, the Force is capable of an endless list of powers. Today, we will explore 20 of the most important things the Force can accomplish and tell you about this energy field that holds the Star Wars universe together. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Ironic. You could save others from death.
Is the Force capable of creating life? Star Wars Revenge of the Sith introduced us to one of the greatest abilities of the Force, wherein this energy field showcases its ability to create new life. In order to create new life, the Force makes use of midichlorians and manipulates them to create a new entity. In order to do this, the Force wielder must be powerful enough, as it takes a lot of energy to bend midichlorians to one's will and then use them to create a new being. Just before Palpatine betrayed Darth Plagueis mastered the ability to manipulate midichlorians and started the cell division process that created Anakin Skywalker. Anakin is the most prominent example of this Force ability, and he even went on to become one of the most powerful beings in the entire franchise. Anakin's blood was made out of over 20,000 midichlorians, and his mere existence is proof of just how powerful the Force really is. What is the Thought Bomb? Exploring an extremely powerful Force ability. The Thought Bomb is essentially one of the most powerful abilities of the Force, and one needs to perform an elaborate Sith ritual in order to create it. When the Sith come together to combine their dark powers, they can create a Thought Bomb that could eliminate any Force-sensitive beings in their vicinity. The Thought Bomb did not differentiate between the Jedi and the Sith, and it would wipe out all Force users that were within its trajectory. Darth Bane had once used the Thought Bomb to get rid of the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Army of Light. This power was first used by Sith Lord Vitiate, who used the ritual of Nathema to consume an entire world. When this bomb was detonated, it essentially annihilated any Force-sensitive beings around it and then absorbed their fragmented souls. Any being capable of performing this Sith ritual held an immense amount of power in their hands, but it was also quite a risky power, as it could also result in the destruction of its own user. Since the detonators were the closest to the bomb when it exploded, they suffered the most when the bomb absorbed their souls and subjected them to an eternity of torture.
The Force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
Yes, I know.
Battle meditation is near invincible. Force-sensitive beings can also use the Force to engage in battle meditation, which is a process by which one can bring all the troops under one's control. In this way, a Force user could command a majority of the troops to follow their orders and work for their side. They could also sway their enemy's forces to work for them instead, and strategically win any war. Battle meditation also worked in a matter of seconds, which meant that any Force user who decided to use this power could control opposing troops and change the course of the war in a moment. This power can also be compared to the hive mind actions seen in some species, wherein they all share the same objective and work towards a common goal. By enabling battle meditation, one could also boost the stamina as well as the fighting abilities of one's troops, while directly impacting the enemy's force's will to fight. Jedi Master Odan was the first Force user to use this ability during the Unification War, and Grandmaster Yoda also used this ability at a later date during his mission to Vajun. Even the dark side had the ability to twist the wills of their armies, and this extreme use of power was known as Sith battle coordination. Can the Force create fire? Force-sensitive beings could perform pyrokinesis, which essentially refers to the ability to create fire out of thin air. One could use the Force to rub air molecules together to an extent where one could generate enough friction to start a fire. Many Sith and Jedi were adept at pyrokinesis, and there have been numerous instances in the Star Wars franchise where Force users have been able to manipulate fire. Most Force users did not create fire out of thin air and relied on an existing fire source to create more fire. However, one variant of this ability enabled the Jedi to manipulate the molecules of any combustible object or even conjure flames from the sky. Leia Solo once showcases her pyrokinesis abilities when she uses the Force to light a bunch of candles. Darth Sidious also once used this power to turn a flame from a fireplace into an inferno that killed Senator Pack's team. Both the Jedi and the Sith had the ability to conjure fire, and some other Force traditions, such as the Night Sisters of Dathomir, could also perform pyrokinesis. Force-sensitive beings could use pyrokinesis to perform a wide range of tasks, and Asajj Ventress once even used this ability to manipulate flames to create a safe path for her in the midst of the fire.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
Telekinesis, one of the most commonly used Force abilities. Telekinesis is the ability to manipulate any matter from a distance, and it is one of the most common Force abilities that can be performed by almost all Force-sensitive beings. It was also essential for all Jedi and Sith to be able to perform telekinesis at the very least, and it was a neutral power that both the light and dark side could use. Essentially, telekinesis allowed the user to manipulate any physical matter by touching it, holding it, or grabbing it from a distance. It also enabled the user to push, pull, or lift anyone, as well as disarm them. While telekinesis was a common Force ability, the user's connection to the Force played a massive role in the precision, accuracy, and magnitude with which they could manipulate other objects. Sometimes, telekinesis also impacts the user mentally and leads to exhaustion if they apply this power on heavy objects, falling objects, or moving vehicles. They also need to direct all their attention towards performing telekinesis, which often left them vulnerable as they couldn't defend themselves during a fight or even wield their lightsabers. Typically, a Force-sensitive being used bodily gestures or eye movements to perform telekinesis, and it was seen that intense emotions such as fear or anger made it easier for them to apply the Force while manipulating objects. How effective is the Transfer Essence Force ability? First seen in the Mandalorian television series, the Force has the ability to allow one Force-sensitive being to transfer their essence to another being in order to save their life or even bring them back to life after they seem to have died. In this series, Grogu realized that Greef Karga was seriously injured, and he then transferred some of his life essences to him to help him heal his injury. While this procedure only required some amount of life essence, it was still quite draining, and Grogu even fell asleep as soon as he performed this task. In extreme scenarios, one could even die while transferring the life essence to another being, especially if they needed to heal from fatalities. In Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Rey ends up dying, and Ben Solo comes across her body and decides to transfer his life essence to save her. He ended up transferring all of his life essences to her, which resulted in her returning to life. However, Ben Solo ended up dying at the end of this process. Transferring one's life essence was quite risky, and Force-sensitive beings had to be careful while using this Force ability. Force Lightning, a symbol of power. Force Lightning was first introduced in Star Wars The Return of the Jedi, and it was the ability to conjure electricity out of nothing and then use it against one's enemies. Palpatine used Force Lightning in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith when he tried to attack Mace Windu. Force Lightning was inarguably one of the most powerful abilities of the Force, and one can only imagine just how dangerous this power could be in the hands of someone as strong as Palpatine. When Mace Windu managed to reflect the lightning at Palpatine, it nearly deformed his face. This power was used mainly by the dark side, and Palpatine once even commented that he doesn't need a lightsaber when he could use this ability instead. When Darth Vader presented Luke's lightsaber to Palpatine, the Emperor stated that the lightsaber was a Jedi weapon, and he later even showcased his ability to conjure electricity and project it in the form of Force Lightning. This ability was essentially considered to be a symbol of power, and Palpatine once used it to defeat Luke and also eventually cause Darth Vader's death. It is certainly an extreme ability, and one must be very careful while dealing with something as destructive as Force Lightning. This power was predominantly used by the dark side, and it cannot be easily blocked by an opponent. However, the powerful Jedi Master Yoda once showcased the ability to block Force Lightning with his bare hands. When Count Dooku tries to use Force Lightning against Yoda again, Yoda simply absorbs the lightning energy, which shows that he is inarguably one of the most powerful Force wielders in the franchise. The power of Shatterpoint. Shatterpoint refers to a Force user's ability to fixate on an opponent's object's weakness and then attack it, and it is a complex phenomenon that requires total concentration. Shatterpoints can essentially be referred to as fault lines, and Force users could detect these fault lines and then use them to weaken their opponents. Typically, this power could be used to pinpoint an opponent's weakness or injury, and then reopen these injuries, or even make them worse. Cade Skywalker often used Shatterpoint to cause pain to his opponents and leave them with disturbing injuries. Even a single strike could cause detrimental harm to one's victim, and one could even sense their victim's old wound points and reopen them. When used on objects, a Force user could locate the object's weak point and then shatter it or break it into multiple pieces. This was quite a rare ability of the Force, and it could even destroy objects that seemingly appeared indestructible. In one such instance, Jaina Solo was training with Luke Skywalker when she used Shatterpoint to destroy a disc made of pure Mandalorian iron. How lethal is a Force Storm? Force Storm is one of the most deadly abilities of the Force, and it was typically used by the dark side of the Force. Using this ability, the Sith could create hyperspace wormholes that could displace anything, ranging from tiny objects to whole planets, across huge distances in the galaxy. These Force Storms were also very difficult to create, but they were unstoppable after they were unleashed. Typically, the Sith used an artifact known as the Dark Staff to create a Force Storm. While Force Storm also refers to some other Force powers, this particular ability of the Force was concerned with conjuring up storms or vortexes that could destroy warships or even entire planets. The Sith needed tremendous control over their actions in order to conjure a Force Storm, and Darth Sidious was once even consumed by the storm during the Battle of Pinnacle Base after he neglected it. The Force Storm essentially destroyed the very fabric of the space-time continuum, opening up huge rifts in the universe. In some cases, Force Storms could also safely transport individuals across the galaxy, and they even had the power to send someone to the future if they used certain Sith artifacts while creating the Force Storm. The ability to levitate. The Force also enabled its users to levitate, and this power was somewhat similar to telekinesis. However, telekinesis allowed a Force user to manipulate other objects, while this ability only allowed them to manipulate their own bodies. Levitation was quite a rare ability, and only some Force-sensitive beings were capable of levitating themselves. Force levitation sometimes allowed an individual to fly for a short distance, and Rey was seen practicing this ability during her training in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Essentially, levitation was a telekinetic power that allowed an individual to suspend themselves midair, and it was typically used by the light side of the Force. During the Republic era, a Jedi Master named Cohmac Vetus showed extraordinary levitation skills, and he was also present at the Amaxine space station when 8 T-droids attacked it. At that time, Affie Hollow had asked Vetus to fly everyone to safety, but Jedi Knight Des Ryden intervened and told him that levitation was not possible in such high-pressure situations. In this manner, levitation did not serve much purpose in a dangerous fight, but it was still a useful power in terms of transportation. How does Force Drain work? Force Drain was one of those Force abilities that was primarily used by the dark side to drain their opponent's strength, powers, or Force energy. In some cases, Darth Bane could even use this ability to create a deadly field around him that would destroy anyone in close contact with him. However, this required a lot of effort, and it also drained Darth Bane to a great extent. Most commonly, Force Drain was used to damage an opponent's body and mind, so that one could easily defeat them. Darth Nihilus was well known for using Force Drain, and was powerful enough to drain an entire planet's life. He had once used Force Drain to decimate the planet of Katar, and this ability made him quite untouchable. On the other hand, Palpatine also used Force Drain to drain Rey and Ben Solo's life in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. After draining them of their life, Palpatine absorbed their life in order to restore himself. What is Force Sense? Force Sense was undoubtedly one of the most basic abilities of the Force, and it was a widely used skill among the Jedi as well as the Sith. Force Sense allowed Obi-Wan to feel the pain of a dying planet and its inhabitants, and this was one of the first instances where Force Sense was used in the franchise. In simple words, Force Sense is the ability to feel the ripples in the Force across the universe, and these ripples typically point towards any traumatic events or impending danger. Darth Vader's Force Sense allowed him to realize that Obi-Wan was on the Death Star, and this power connected Force users to the universe and gave them hints about what was going on around them. Jedi training also incorporated Force Sense from a young age, and any young Jedi student was first taught to heighten their senses and learn how the Force connects them. This helped them to be in touch with their environment, detect any danger in their surroundings, and sense any opponents in their surroundings. In an extreme form, Force Sense can also be related to Force Sight, which refers to one's ability to peek into the future. The frightening ability of the Crucitorn. Crucitorn is one of the most dangerous Force abilities, and it is typically associated with Darth Bane. Bane was known for his cruel ways of inflicting pain upon his opponents, and he often used Crucitorn as a means of achieving his goal. While this ability could also be used to ease others' pain and suffering, Darth Bane typically used it to manipulate others or amplify their pain. If one could not access an opponent's mind, they could even use Crucitorn to attack them physically or target any open wounds to make them hurt more. In an alternate scenario, it could also be used to ease one's pain and suffering, and it did have its own benefits. This power was named Crucitorn after a Jedi Master who was known among the Jedi for his pain, endurance, and durability. While the Sith used this power to hurt others, the Jedi used it to alleviate someone's pain. There was another variant of this ability that was taught to Jedi Knight Jacen Solo by Vergere. Crucitorn was equally used by the Jedi as well as the Sith for different purposes, and Darth Bane and Eeth Koth were some notable users of this ability. The Great Protection Bubble. The Protection Bubble was one of those features that could be used by both light and dark sides of the Force. Creating a protection bubble was a little tricky, but it allowed the user to cast a defensive sphere around themselves to protect themselves from any external attacks. The bubble was powerful enough to deflect blaster bolts, laser blasts, weapons, and even Force lightning, and it was typically blue in color. The Night Sisters of Dathomir displayed the unique ability to create green bubbles, and this ability was especially useful when one needed protection during an attack. The protection bubble could also be used to trap an attacker, and the Jedi Master Waror had once cast a protection bubble around him and Darth Bane. While Waror was trapped with Darth Bane, he ensured that Johun Othone or anyone else outside the bubble was not exposed to Darth Bane's Force lightning attack. Darth Bane's attack ended up killing Waror within the bubble, and it also electrocuted Bane himself. In another scenario, Kasim used a protection bubble to protect himself from Darth Bane's shockwave attack. The power of Force projection. Force projection allows a Force user to create an image of themselves and then project it across the galaxy. It essentially means that one can project an image and then send it to someone in the form of a message, even if they are physically away from them. It was an extreme form of communication and it required tremendous focus and practice. However, one could create a convincing rendition of oneself once one achieved mastery over Force projection. Force users essentially poured their living Force into the cosmic Force to create a projection of themselves that could travel a distance of several light years. This ability was used by Luke Skywalker in Star Wars The Last Jedi, especially during the Battle of Crait. Force projection was a dangerous ability, and the user had to be quite careful while dabbling in it. If they tried to project an image of themselves for too long, or even send it across long distances, they were at a huge risk of losing strength or dying in extreme cases. It was also not recommended to use this ability more than once, as it could be extremely taxing. Force users could also project younger versions of themselves, or even show them holding objects that might not be in their possession, and these images were realistic enough to fool most sensors and droids. Exploring the mind-probing ability of the Force. Mind-probing refers to a Force user's ability to read a person's mind and gain access to any information, emotion, or even memories of their victim. They could learn the victim's surface thoughts or even delve deeper into their minds and learn their secrets. However, some individuals were able to protect themselves from this power, and they could shield their thoughts or deny access to their minds. At the end of the day, the Force user's connection to the Force played a role in their ability to perform mind-probing. When they tried to read through an unwilling subject's mind, it could also have side effects on the subject, as they might feel discomfort while trying to resist. Furthermore, it could also overwhelm or damage the subject's mind if one tried to misuse this power or use it for a long period of time. Some powerful Force users were utterly immune to this power, and mind probing was one of those Force abilities that worked well depending on the user's mastery of the Force. Kylo Ren was often seen using this ability in Star Wars The Force Awakens, and he once even used it on Poe Dameron to learn the location of the BB-8. The Force-enabled lightsaber duels. Both the light and dark sides of the Force typically choose lightsabers to be their preferred weapon, and the Force is a crucial element that makes these weapons so powerful. While lightsabers may appear to be swords with lights, they are actually powered by the Force. While anyone could wield a lightsaber and swing it around, it took a lot of training to master the art of connecting with the Force during lightsaber duels. Skilled practitioners of the Force gained an added advantage over their opponents, and a lot of the lightsaber duels in the prequel series would have been over in a matter of seconds if it were not for the Force's connection to the lightsabers. The Force also allows the user to block blaster bolts and move quickly, among other things. Ever since lightsabers were introduced in Return of the Jedi, they have made for powerful weapons, and they have also appeared in almost every combat scene in the franchise. Since the Jedi and the Sith both depend on the Force for most of their powers, it only makes sense that they need a good connection with the Force during lightsaber duels as well. The power of Force Light. Force Light was one of those Force abilities that could only be used by the light side of the Force, and it essentially allowed the Jedi to weaken their opponent's connection to the Force. In this way, the Jedi could use Force Light to weaken any Sith opponent, or even diminish the darkness cast by the Sith in a particular place or even person. The Jedi would use their Force connection to create powerful blasts of the light side's energy and thereby eradicate the Sith's darkness. Furthermore, the Jedi could also use the Force Light to destroy the connection between a Sith Lord and his followers. Jedi Master Yaddle was one of the first users of this ability, and he learned it while studying Jedi holocrons. Later on, Nome Sunrider mastered this power and even used it against the Sith by combining it with her ability to perform battle meditation. Luke Skywalker also used Force Light at one point, and sometimes this ability gave a glowing aura to any Jedi who used it. Even Yoda is known for his skillful mastery of Force Light, and it is certainly a useful power that gives an edge to the Jedi. Can the Force revive the dead and injured? The Jedi typically had a technique to heal anyone around them, but Force-sensitive beings also had a special technique known as Healing Trance to heal their own injuries, also known as the Hibernation Trance. This technique enables its user to slow down their heart and metabolic rate. By doing this, the body could redirect its resources towards healing any injuries or wounds. Sometimes Force users use this trick to fool their opponents into thinking that they had died, and in other cases, this trance helped them to prolong their ability to survive in extreme environments with little air and water. The Jedi technique for healing others worked on any organic creature as long as they opened up to the Force-sensitive being who was trying to heal them. This process revitalized any fallen soldier, but it directly drained the practitioner in the process. Revitalization was one of those Force powers that had to be used sparingly, and it required a great deal of practice as well as a gentle touch. It was seen in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker when Kylo used this technique to heal Rey, and Luke Skywalker also once used this to save Mara Jade.
They were in pain.
It is the future you see.
The power of Force Premonition. Force Premonition is one of the most underrated abilities of the Force, and it has enabled several Force-sensitive beings to accomplish many things. It was also known as Force Visions, and these visions essentially allowed its user to look into the past, present, or future. Yoda often stated that these visions were extremely important, but he also warned others that the future is always in motion, and one must be wary of the fact that the events from these visions could always change. These premonitions were quite rare, and they were also out of the user's control. With the help of these premonitions, Luke once had a vision of Han and Leia when they were being tortured on Cloud City in the original trilogy. While Luke was still training to be a Jedi at this point, this vision helped him realize how powerful he would become in the future. Force Premonition was also used at certain points in the prequel series to show us certain events, and one example of this would be Anakin's recurring dreams about his mother's death. He also had premonitions about Padme's death, and these visions were also the reason why Anakin became a pod racer in the future. Rey experienced the Force premonitions in the early days of her training, and it was one of the first Force abilities that she experienced. Conclusion. To sum it up, the Force is an integral part of the Star Wars universe, and the Jedi, as well as the Sith, would be quite powerless if they did not have the power of the Force with them. From the ability to create life, revive individuals, and even perform tasks such as telekinesis, the Force can accomplish pretty much anything and everything. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.